Article 5 Convention of States. Now, those of you who've been watching Levin TV for more than a year or so or listening to me on the radio, you know this is something I strongly, strongly believe in. Article 5 of the Constitution. There it sits. What's it all about? Well, guess what? The legislature in Texas the other day passed an Article 5 Convention of States resolution. That makes 11 states. What does all this mean? You need 34 state legislatures to have passed a resolution that is similar to the other resolutions, covering subjects that are similar to the other resolutions, in order to have a convention of states. What is a convention of states? A convention of states is a meeting of states, where state legislatures, the governors don't even have a role, where state legislatures send delegates, the number of which is agreed to in advance, to this meeting. And they discuss at the meeting, just as Congress would discuss, possible amendments to the Constitution. So there's two ways to amend the Constitution under Article 5. I didn't create them. The framers of the Constitution created them. One is 2/3 of both houses of Congress propose an amendment. It goes to the state legislatures or conventions in the states. Two is for the states to propose amendments to themselves, which have to be ratified the same way. That is 3/4 of the state legislatures or 3/4 of the conventions of state legislatures. You need 38 states to ratify an amendment, but you need 34 states to have this convention of states, a meeting, if you will, to discuss possible amendments to the Constitution. That's as simple as I can put it. We now have 11. Now, by my quick math, 11 out of 34, that's almost a third. Almost 1/3 of the states necessary to have this meeting, Convention of States, have now passed almost identical resolutions. When we get to 15 or 20, I know what's going to happen. The left is going to go nuts, and the Republican Party is going to go nuts, and the media will go nuts. In other words, all those entrenched forces, the leftist ideologues, the Praetorian Guard media, and the Republican corporatists who complain about what's going on, they like what's going on. They do not want us to shake up Washington. We're not interested in shaking up anything. We want our Constitution back, we want our system of government back, and we want to restore the Republic. This is the alarm system that the framers put in place right there in the Constitution. Now, we have the benefit of using the Constitution to save what's left of the Constitution. Now, what about a runaway convention? How can there possibly be a runaway convention? You need 38 states to ratify an amendment. That's hard. That means 13 state legislatures or conventions of states can block anything, just 13. So we need 38. And I know that Eagle Forum is running around out there, and Concerned Women for America and the John Birch Society trying to scare people. There's nothing to be scared about. Now, what is their solution to what's going on in Washington, D.C., to massive debt, to over $200 trillion in unfunded liabilities, to members of Congress who are entrenched and won't leave, to Supreme Court justices who sit for life, some of whom use the position of the court to impose their personal policy preferences in every decision that comes down the pike? I mean, the question to me is, what's the alternative? Well, Mark, you know what? The framers, they don't exist anymore. We're never going to get anybody as smart as Madison or Washington or Franklin or Mason. I know that. I know that quite well. But we don't live under their Constitution anymore, do we? We live under the Constitution of the Warren Court. We live under the Constitution of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Anthony Kennedy and so forth. We do not live under the Constitution of Madison, Washington, Franklin, and Mason. And that's the point. The progressives have succeeded. The progressives have succeeded. Over 100 years of statism, and our system has been turned inside out. Just look what's going on today, briefly. We have blue states and blue cities and blue counties that are nullifying federal immigration law. In federal immigration law, the federal government is legitimately exercising its plenary power when it comes to matters of immigration. It's right there in the Constitution. They're nullifying it. What's being done about it? Nothing, really. Nothing effective on a broad scale, even though Attorney General Jeff Sessions is admirably trying to do some things. So on the one hand, they want to nullify federal law. On the other hand, they use federal law to stamp out any local or state decisions they don't like. They do that through the Environmental Protection Agency, massive numbers of regulations coming out of the federal government, almost 4,000 laws, some with criminal penalties, all with financial penalties, coming out of this massive fourth branch of government that doesn't even exist in the Constitution that the progressives have concocted and created, the massive administrative state with so-called experts and professionals who run our lives. And so, for the most part, they want centralized, iron-fisted, top-down decision-making, except when they don't. Then they want nullification. And now we have federal judges in blue states who won't even allow the president to exercise his power to protect the nation when it comes to an executive order limiting refugees coming into this country for a short period of time from places where we can't vet. And I could go on and on and on. A Supreme Court that has essentially nationalized all so-called social issues, issues of prayer, issues of marriage, issues of sex. We can't even make those decisions for ourselves anymore. Apparently, only the 9 justices on the Supreme Court, the 9 lawyers, only they are wise enough and advanced enough and smart enough to make these decisions. The people can't make these decisions for themselves anymore. So we have a system that is completely out of sorts, which is exactly what the counter-revolutionaries, the statists, the progressives, have wanted, and they've succeeded. And so several years ago, I wrote the Liberty Amendments. And the Liberty Amendments sets forth 11 possible reform amendments. I mean, they can be altered, there can be other amendments, less amendments, whatever it is, that seeks to restore our republic, that seeks to restore our constitutional system. Because I have concluded, as most of you have, it doesn't matter. You can elect Republicans till you're red in the face. So we can have a Republican House and Senate, a Republican Senate, a Democrat House, a Republican House, a Democrat Senate, a Republican President, a Republican Senate, Republican House, any mix you want. Any mix you want. They're not going to reform the basics, the fundamentals that need to be fixed. You've got the Supreme Court and the other courts that sit there to block them. You've got, again, this massive administrative state that gets involved in every single aspect of your life because apparently you're too stupid to know how to live, but you're wise enough to vote. Do you ever figure that one out? I haven't. Our franchise has been watered down. So much of what the government does is done rotely, right? So we need to get back this whole notion of representative republicanism, of constitutional republicanism, of federalism, that the federal government is supposed to have this role, and we're supposed to have this role, all out here. So that's the whole movement, the purpose for what we're doing. And a big thing happened earlier, I guess it was last week, and that is when the legislature in Texas, the Senate in Texas had passed it. It was a close call in the legislature because some of the Republican leaders, quote unquote, in the House in Texas were opposed to it. But it worked its way through, and it passed last week. And you had a governor there, even though he has no actual legal role in the process, Governor Abbott, who is terrific, and who strongly supported and has written about it as well. So I wanted to explain that a little bit. And let's see Convention of States project. Let's see how they explain it too. Go ahead.
Article 5 of the United States Constitution gives we the people the power to put the federal government back in its constitutional box and expand liberty for all. Once 2/3 of the states pass similar applications, a convention of states will be called, and there is nothing the federal government can do to stop it. This isn't a red movement or a blue movement. It's an American movement based on one fundamental question: who decides? Who should decide the issues that affect your community? Washington, D.C., or you? The Convention of States Action Resolution applies for an Article 5 convention that would propose constitutional reforms limited to 3 topics. First, fiscal restraints on the federal government. With over $140 trillion in unfunded liabilities, we need a balanced budget. But our resolution also allows for caps on federal spending and taxation. The second topic is limiting the power and jurisdiction of the federal government. The Supreme Court has authorized the feds to have control over almost every aspect of our lives. The COS Action Resolution empowers us to restore the Constitution to its original intent and return power to the states and the people. Finally, term limits. Thanks to a corrupt ruling class in Washington, trust in the federal government is at an all-time low. That's why our resolution gives Convention of States commissioners the power to send the career politicians packing, including the judiciary and other federal officials. So what can you do? First of all, sign the petition at cosaction.com and get as many of your friends and family to do the same. With your full address, your state legislators will know that you really are their constituents in their district. Call, email, or request a meeting with your state legislators to ask them to co-sponsor the COS resolution in their state. Get plugged in with your local Convention of States team so you can stay engaged, educate others, and respond to national calls to action. Our success depends on you, so we're inviting you to be part of history. Let's invoke the constitutional solution that's as big as the problem.